Now, an independent audit has cleared the fleet transport of non-compliance linked to the deadly Boksburg explosion on Christmas Eve. The blast claimed 34 lives and injured scores more. The audit has found that the fleet transport who owned the truck involved has complied with legal and best practice requirements. The truck had become stuck under a too-low bridge, and damage to the vehicle later culminated in a massive explosion. Among those killed were emergency personnel and spectators. For more on this, I'm joined by Richard Durrant, who is the director of a consulting and auditing firm, the firm who conducted the audit. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it. Perhaps just tell us about your assessment and what you found.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on your show, on your news channel. I am currently on leave down in Port Elizabeth, but I'm very happy to be on your channel. So I was one of the auditors, or one of the investigators that was employed to look at this incident. I was not the forensic investigator. I was tasked, or my scope was more around legal compliance and was the driver legally compliant? Was the driver on a compliant route? And this is what I did. So I have not been to site. I haven't seen the vehicle. I've done everything remotely based on documentation provided by the client, by the truck owner. So that was my scope. So I looked at the tracking. Sorry. Okay.
Yes, no, okay, that makes sense, because I was going to ask you, if you were on site, how did you do your investigations, what information you were given, but it makes sense if you're telling me that you did a majority of the work remotely because you were dealing more with documentation. So I do understand that you reviewed a number of documents. Maybe you could go through that. For example, the tracking and trip reports. There were also journey plans and risk assessments that were done. Maybe just take us through the documents that you were asked to review and audit and what you found.
Okay, so one of on the list you just read out, there's a reference there to a SQAS Africa audit, which was conducted by SASL. I am an SQAS, which is a Safety Quality Assessment System, or for sustainability. I'm one of the more senior auditors in that audit category. It is a industry audit. It is not a legal audit, but it does include a lot of legal requirements as part of the audit. So that was my starting point. I got a copy of that audit. As I say, SASL did the audit on the company in late November. I then asked for a copy of that report. I went through that and then highlighted any areas that I wanted to look at more specifically. And those included, did they have a route risk assessment for the route? It's not a legal requirement. Legally, they need to agree a route with the driver. But the route risk assessment is more from a audit compliance point of view. They had very detailed route risk assessments, or some companies call them journey plans. So that was really my starting point. I then looked at the tracking to see, did the driver actually follow the route that was specified in the journey plans? And other than the last few kilometers, I found no variations, no issues with that. So that the tracking was to determine what route did the truck follow. The second was he speeding? Was he behaving himself? Did he have enough rest, etc., etc.? And I found no non-conformances with that. So those were my main documents of reference. I questioned. I'd heard on news broadcasts that the vehicle was supposed to be going to Zimbabwe, and then later on I heard it was then destined for Botswana. I questioned that. They sent me copies of WhatsApp communication between the company, the client, whose gas they were transporting, and the driver, where it clearly stated the client wanted to divert the truck and the company then put in place the motions to instruct the driver to change his route. And so all of that I looked at in a lot of detail and could find no safety critical non-conformances.
Okay, so I struggle with this, what you've just told me, and I'll tell you why I struggle with this. Because if you're saying that you looked at the assessment and the reports of the journey, the plans and risk assessments, tracking and trip reports. Now, 34 families have lost their loved ones, and they are trying to understand how the company was not alerted to the fact that the truck driver was lost and that he took the wrong off-ramp. Was that not at all picked up or signaled to say, you are lost, hang 10 before you move anywhere, because there are bridges that could be a risk? Was that not at all red flagged or picked up? Is that not the responsibility of the company that's tracking these trucks to say, when you are lost, stop before you continue, because look at what's happened now?
From when he got lost, is the word you used, to when this incident happened was probably 10 minutes. They don't only have one truck, so there are a number of trucks that are being tracked. It's a valid question, but having come out the transport industry, to pick up that your truck is off route within 10 minutes is actually very difficult, unless you've got geofencing in place, which some companies have on specific routes where it's dangerous to stop, where there's a high risk of theft or something like that. Companies have geofencing, so if a truck goes off the route in that particular area, it will trigger and send an alert. But from your normal tracking, due respect to expect the tracking company or the transport company to pick that up within 10 minutes is in an ideal situation, yes, but in practice it's actually very difficult.
Well, surely there should be an ideal situation when a truck, a gas tanker, is traveling and there is a bridge in front of him. He goes under that bridge and 34 lives are lost. So are you telling me that there's no geosensing when it comes to low bridges that could cause serious damage like the one we've just seen?
Probably not, because that's not a normal route for him.
But is that not, sorry to interrupt, Richard, but is that not a red flag? Is that not something that you, in your audits, should be looking at as a red flag and non-compliance? That the company, should a truck divert or get lost or whatever the case might be, should not be moving into suburban areas, especially when there's an unknown bridge? Because we've also been told that the markings on the bridge were not there, basically. So I'm just trying to understand how that for you as an auditor was not a red flag to say, but maybe you should be assessing this and picking things up when a truck driver gets lost, especially when you're in a suburban area and there are these bridges.
There's no legal requirement to have tracking on your vehicle. There's nowhere in the law that says you have to have tracking on your vehicle, so it is not a legal non-compliance. There's nothing in the law that stipulates that you've got to have a detailed route risk assessment. It says you must agree a basic route with the driver. So from a legal non-compliance point of view, they were not legally non-compliant. Best practice, questionable, but legally they were not legally non-compliant. That was my assessment.
So you're saying best practice questionable. Just elaborate there for us.
Well, in terms of the SKS audit that was conducted, the auditor checked the tracking of the vehicle. The tracking was in place. The tracking works. So in best practice, you should have tracking in your vehicle. But as I say, it's not a requirement. Most companies these days do have tracking. They have cameras. They have satellite tracking. But so I was looking at legal and best practice. Best practice, yes, maybe there should have been an alert, but it's not a legal fine.
Okay, let's move over into the issue of the driver's experience and the necessary certification that's needed. Many were questioning his experience, whether or not he was supposed to be driving a tank like that or a truck like that. From your assessments and the documentation that you have been given, what did you find there?
He had an EC license, which is a heavy-duty license, is what you need for that type of vehicle. He had a dangerous goods training, which is a legal requirement. He has a dangerous goods, what they call a PDP, professional driving permit for dangerous goods. He had a valid medical done by an occupational health practitioner. So from that point of view, he ticked all the boxes. There was nothing untoward with regard to his legal requirements to drive that type of vehicle.
Okay, I want to ask you one last question, Richard. Who should take accountability from your assessment? Because you have the version of the company, the truck driver. We have received quite a lengthy statement from what the truck driver says. He tried to alert people. There were 30 minutes before the tanker actually exploded. There were no signs on the bridge. He didn't realize that there was going to be an incline at the end of the bridge. In your assessment, who is supposed to take responsibility? 34 lives have been lost and more people are still fighting for their lives in hospital. Who must take accountability and responsibility?
I can't comment on that. I can't comment. As I say, I wasn't on site. I haven't seen the bridge. I've seen pictures. That wasn't part of my scope, so I unfortunately can't comment on that. There was a forensic investigator that was also employed. I haven't seen their report. I haven't heard anything from the forensic investigator. I've just done what I was asked to do, and those were my findings.
So from your findings, you are clearing the company and the truck driver. There was no fault there.
As far as I'm concerned, it was an error perhaps on the driver's fault, but he was legally compliant to drive that vehicle. He can drive it in an urban area. There's no restriction on that. Gas is delivered in urban areas every day. Every single day there's gas being delivered. Seen reports saying, oh, it should go by rail. You can't deliver gas by rail to a restaurant, for example. So in practice, it's got to go by road. And,
so you said that perhaps it was an error from the driver's side. When you say an error, what do you mean?
He missed his turn. That was the error. And I know that area fairly well. It's not easy to turn around a 17-meter truck on Main Reef Road. It's not easy at all to do that. So. And I'm now making assumptions that he found the first turnoff that he could take and he went in. Why there weren't any signs, why he was maybe didn't anticipate the height of the bridge. I think you answered the question. He didn't expect a slope. But that, again, wasn't part of my scope.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We do appreciate it. That was Richard Durrant, who is the director at a consulting and auditing firm that was asked to do an assessment with regards to the Boksburg tanker explosion. More news.